Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really compelling thesis from policy strategist and author Olayomi Ola-David. In her analysis, she lays out a powerful argument for why the global economic center of gravity is shifting, and more importantly, exactly where she believes it's landing. Her perspective is absolutely crucial for anyone interested in global development, trade, or investment. So, let's get right into it.
Right off the bat, she absolutely does not mince words. She writes, and I quote, "The next civilization that will make the achievements of the West pale into insignificance is emerging. You can safely engrave these words in gold." Talk about a bold statement, right? She's setting up a massive macro argument here. In her view, Africa isn't just participating in the global economy. Africa is poised to become the absolute next global engine of growth. She wants her readers, especially smart investors, to completely reframe their understanding of the so-called third world. She's telling us that the future is already emerging, and the scale of it is going to be totally unprecedented.
So let's look at the next global engine and the investment shift.
You might be wondering, how does an entire continent actually become the next global engine? Well, according to Ola-David, it starts with a very specific structural shift in how money flows in. African national policy environments are becoming highly favorable, specifically toward foreign direct investments, or FDIs. She makes a really interesting contrast between FDIs and portfolio investments. In her analysis, FDIs are the true catalysts for domestic economy because they create actual, tangible value and employment. Crucially, she draws on development literature to point out that FDIs bring what she calls knowledge spillover and demonstration effects from foreign firms operating locally. She argues that African policies are actively recognizing this and basically rolling out the red carpet for this specific, value-creating type of investment.
And you know, this policy shift isn't just happening in a vacuum. It's taking place alongside a monumental structural change. The launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA, is essentially the definitive green light for international trade growth. She explains that this agreement signals an entirely new trajectory for the continent. It's all about Africa maximizing its contribution to global trade and seamlessly integrating into global value chains. For her, this is the institutional framework that will allow those foreign direct investments we just talked about to truly scale across borders.
So what's her advice to smart investors? It's pretty straightforward. You've got to gain a first-mover advantage. She points out that literally every single African country is endowed with incredibly rich resources, both human and natural. But the real magic happens, she says, when you mix those domestic endowments with the right foreign technical resources and experience. That combination is what accelerates productivity. She's essentially drawing a treasure map here, telling forward-thinking minds that the resources are ready and just waiting for technical acceleration.
But this brings up a super practical question. If the whole continent is rising, and free trade is opening up these massive value chains, and every country has rich resources, where exactly do you look first? Where is the ultimate footprint for investors?
Let's zoom in on the ultimate footprint: Nigeria.
This is really the focal point of her entire thesis. As we zoom in on her analysis, she zeroes right in on Nigeria, the most populous country on the continent. For her, this isn't just one option on a menu, it is the absolute prime target. Ola-David makes her stance crystal clear. As she humorously advises her own clients, you are either in Nigeria or not anywhere yet on the African continent. That carries some massive strategic weight. She's basically making the case that Nigeria's scale and influence are so immense that your African strategy is fundamentally incomplete or, frankly, non-existent if it doesn't have a footprint in Nigeria.
Let's break down exactly why she believes this. She doesn't just make the claim, she's got the specific, localized advantages to back it up. First up, human capital. She describes Nigeria's youth and working-age population as some of the most energetic, innovative, and value-creating hands you can find anywhere on the continent. But it's not just the people, it's the timing. She highlights that the Nigerian government is urgently seeking to diversify its economic mainstay away from oil. When you combine this massive, innovative workforce with a government actively pivoting its economy, she argues that value-creating FDIs will enjoy considerable location economies. It's basically a perfect storm for foreign investment.
Which leads us nicely into turning problems into opportunities. Now we're moving into a really important conceptual shift, one that addresses the skepticism people often have when looking at emerging markets. We all know it's super common to read headlines about the challenges facing Africa and Nigeria. But this brings us to perhaps the most profound part of her philosophy. She states that Africa's and Nigeria's problems are really just opportunities for forward-looking investors to leverage and create value. It's a total perspective shift. Where others might see hurdles or infrastructural deficits, she literally sees a blank canvas for value creation. For her, every single problem in goods and services delivery is just a gap waiting to be filled by a smart investor seeking that first-mover advantage. She firmly believes that solving these problems benefits the investor and, crucially, creates value for the benefit of everyone involved.
And that brings us to her final, incredibly powerful conclusion. Africa is gold. Thinking Africa? Invest in Nigeria next. She leaves us with this crystal-clear call to action, boiling her whole argument down to one undeniable directive. She's taken us from the macro view of Africa as the next global civilization, right down to the mechanics of foreign direct investment, and finally, pinpointed Nigeria as the ultimate destination. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. As the global economic center of gravity shifts and the achievements of the past pale in comparison to what's emerging, where do you plan to position your own global perspective in the future? Thanks for walking through this explainer with me, and keep learning.